marijuana it's become such a controversial topic in American politics because of the huge push to now have it legalized.
Well, so many people do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In New York, especially. Now, like, unless you have enough to distribute, they're not going to arrest you for it. You're probably just going to throw it away. Most of the people that I know smoke weed, and there used to be this stigma before that, only people who were down in the dumps, who weren't doing anything with their lives, smoke weed. But I know people who are professionals, who are lawyers, who are doctors, who are social workers, mothers, politicians, fathers.
Kids. Not kids.
Lots and lots of kids. And
teens.
Yeah,
teens. I hope.
I hope.
Well, I'm not advocating for drugs. Let me just shut up. So go ahead.
That they smoke weed. And I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I think it's, that's up to the individual to decide. But they're functioning humans.
Supposedly it doesn't have negative health effects.
Yeah. That's what I saw in some of my research. But it's weird, but that's why we're here having this conversation today, because we're going to be talking about the legalization of marijuana and whether it should happen, if it should happen, why it should happen, if it should not happen, why not. And I'm very excited because we have our guest on the show today. His name is John Walker. He is a senior policy analyst at Firedoglake, which launched the Just Say Now We campaign. So Just Say Now campaign is a campaign for marijuana legalization made of transpartisan alliance of organizations seeking to improve our nation's drug laws. Their mission is to be a group of all individuals of all ages, backgrounds, and political leanings that share the simple conviction that marijuana prohibition must end. So John Walker, thank you so much for coming onto the show, and say your hellos.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
No problem. So, John, before we begin, I got to ask you, what is your favorite color? Because it has nothing to do with the segment.
I would probably say blue.
I thought you were going to say green. I went to the website, and it was green, and I was like, yeah.
No, blue like the sky. Come on.
Because you're high.
And the ocean.
The ocean. No. I thought blue like the sky.
Like the sky because you're high? Oh, my goodness.
John, don't worry about me. I'm a nerd, okay? I make attempts to be funny, and it's very painful and awkward. That's how I got my girlfriend. She dated me, so I would shut up. So... Anyways, we're going to get on the conversation, and we're talking about the legalization of marijuana. But before we get to that, please tell me a little bit more about your organization and the campaign in particular. What have you guys been doing in your campaign to kind of push, make weed legal today?
All right, well, the organization Firedoglake, we're one of the largest progressive blogs, and we started the Just Say Now campaign back in 2010. And we noticed that there's very little energy amongst either, the political activists or politicians behind this issue, even though the American people's opinions of it were changing dramatically. If you looked at the polling, there's been a 20% growth in the number of people who think marijuana should be legal increased, from 20% to 50% in only 2 decades. And so we felt it was a time, this is a really important issue. It's not just, about personal freedom. It's a big, civil rights issue. Most of the people who are arrested for marijuana tend to be minorities. Rich white people almost never get arrested, even though they're more likely to use marijuana. So there's a whole host of issues for why it should be legal. And we launched the campaign because we didn't feel like there's enough sort of politically driven people in this space to really be pushing this conversation forward. And in that time, it seems to have really exploded, especially with the passage of the legalization in Colorado and Washington.
Speaking of exploding, there's been explosive debate about marijuana. Was that corny?
Yeah, it was. Marijuana doesn't explode.
No. But there has been a huge debate about legalizing marijuana, and just to kick it right off, there's been this huge push to say that the reason it shouldn't be legal is because it is so harmful. One blunt of marijuana, which is just one cigarette of marijuana, I guess you could say, for those of you who don't understand the lingo like me, is as bad as smoking 5 cigarettes. That's what I read that in a study late last night when I was prepping for this, and I want to know, if it's that bad, why should we be legalizing it?
Well, those studies look at the actual chemical content as opposed to the effects of long-term smoking. Most of the research that shows actual marijuana smokers finds very little correlation with cancer or lung problems, especially because people just tend to smoke way less marijuana than you would cigarettes. A heavy cigarette smoker would be smoking maybe 2 packs a day. Heavy marijuana smokers, maybe smoking the equivalent of 2 or 3 joints a day for the most part. So the actual health impacts of it are pretty minor, and that's sort of one of the reasons that the push for legalization has become so popular. Is people realize, most things that are legal, whether it's alcohol or even bacon, are probably more dangerous for you than marijuana.
Bacon.
Baking?
Bacon, man, bacon.
Don't you dare talk badly about bacon, John, okay? Because listen, I'll
does
have
clog the
diabetes,
arteries, though.
but I will love my bacon forever, all right? So there are some health effects to marijuana use then, correct?
There are some. They're relatively minor considering, compared to cigarettes or alcohol or even, saturated fats or something. There's a few studies that show people who start smoking young and smoke a lot of marijuana have a slight reduction in IQ. And this study's a little controversial, but, there's a few indications that it would, mess with short-term memory while you're smoking, but if you stop smoking, your short-term memory will improve after only like a month or so. It can do a little damage to the lungs if you smoke a large quantity over a very long time, but this is really minor compared to, most things.
Hey, John, I'm Patricia here, and, I don't know exactly what my position is on whether we should legalize it or not, but I definitely traveled to Amsterdam, and I wanted to try it, so I did. And I felt that afterward, I was just very lazy. I got and I did very little bit of it because I'm not a smoker. I can't even be around cigarette smoke, or I don't enjoy any. So I did very little bit of it, and very shortly after, I felt lazy. I was tired. I was a little sluggish, giggly but sluggish, and I just felt like if we legalize marijuana and then we have people that can do it like on their lunch break, could that have a potential effect of really, really like our productivity level, for example, at work?
Well, most people are not allowing you to drink at lunch break. Drinking alcohol is going to make you lazy and tired and all those things. Your boss isn't going to let you come back from your lunch break all drunk. It's the same thing with marijuana. You shouldn't be smoking it at your job. This is something that individuals who are adults want to do something on their free time. They should have the freedom to do this.
Very well. I do sometimes do lunchtime margaritas. I won't lie. And you're right.
I agree with him, and I think that people react differently to it. There are some people who say that they're most productive when they're high.
Really?
Yeah.
Like creative, you mean?
Yeah, creatively. Like they think better, or they can brainstorm more effectively when they're high.
The one time I got high, the stripes on my cardigan were falling off.
Oh, stupid. That was not marijuana, dude.
Yeah. And I think that's what everything. Like everything in excess is bad. So if you drink too much alcohol, obviously it's bad. If you eat too much food, you're going to get fat. Like, it's just everything in excess is bad. So I don't think there's a problem with legalizing marijuana.
So John, I mean, we keep talking about it. We seem to feel that, okay, right. I mean, that's a personal responsibility to not do it to the point where you become like, you can't function. So what's the stigma? Why don't we have that stigma against cigarette or drinking, but we have about marijuana? Like, does this started at some time? Was it always this way?
Well, it started, most drug laws in our country, and if you look at the history of almost all of them, has their origins in racism. The first opium laws were about, suppressing the Chinese populations in California. The first marijuana laws were about going after, your jazz musicians and your Hispanics. That's even why they called it marijuana. In America, it was always known as cannabis. That was, always the English term for it, and they specifically called it marijuana to make it sound foreign and Mexican when they first banned marijuana. And so that is a big origin of how the drug war started, and that has remained a big part of the drug war to this day. The number one groups being arrested are still minorities. Young black men and young Hispanic men.
That's a bad idea because marijuana sounds exotic, and I love exotic things. So they really messed up with that one. John, I want to change gears for a little bit and talk about cannabis in its pure form. I once heard this, and this from a pothead friend of mine, so it could be wrong, but I once heard that the lumber industry had a big push to make marijuana illegal because of the plant itself has so many uses. Is that true? And if so, what uses are those, if you know of any?
Well, marijuana was industrial hemp, and, the word cannabis, canvas, that comes from cannabis. Basically everything that was fiber-based about 150 years ago was made from hemp. So, like the paper that they did the original draft of, Constitution Declaration, your draft paper was all made out of hemp. Your covered wagons, that was hemp. Your sails, ships, and all the cordage that made, the United States a big trading, whaling, that was all hemp. So hemp does have a lot of uses. It's been replaced by some other fibers, since then, but there's still a decent amount of industrial hemp growing around the world, just not in the United States, because for whatever weird reason, our law still treats industrial hemp, which has basically no THC in it, the same as marijuana. So it's still not grown in the United States, but it's grown a lot in China and a few other countries.
Oh, okay. So if we legalize marijuana, this would be another substance that we can use and replace for, to, I guess, save resources, you're saying?
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of other fibers which have replaced some of its uses, so it's not like the biggest industrial product, but, thousands upon thousands of acres of it are grown around the world. And if we did legalize marijuana fully in this country, industrial hemp would also fall. And it would, be useful to farmers to have another crop to add to the rotation. It's really good for the soil. It grows really good in certain environments. We used to have, during World War II, because we lost our access to cordage from the Philippines, we encouraged all the farmers all over the country to grow hemp.
Oh, whoa. Okay, whoa. Well, John, that's some really interesting information. I want to continue with this conversation, but we got to go on a quick break. So, John, hold on for a second. And if you're listening, we'll be right back after this quick break, guys. Make sure you call in with your questions, 212-650-6903. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, and we are high on conversation.
Listening to Let Your Voice Be Heard.
Today, this is the topic. Let's talk about sex. How do we handle this issue?
There are a lot more risky behaviors in drinking or drug use that affect sexual activity.
You might build a community. The police officers make more of an attempt to talk to people. They're going to be people who just don't like the cops. So when we have our guns, then, what's the solution?
Do you welcome homosexuals in your church, Pastor?
I'm never going to treat you differently. Never going to put you down. I'm going to say this to you, though. I'm not gay.
They're not stripping or searching or frisking me.
Let Your Voice Be Heard radio.
Every Sunday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. I love that promo, and we are back on.
I have one line in that promo, and that's "Let's talk about sex." You have got to edit that.
I am not.
Is that the best thing I've ever said on this show?
I'll cut you off completely and put sex.
I think it was a good promo, nice and controversial.
It was good, except that all I say is "Let's talk about sex." I see what you mean. You know what, Stan?
Yes, you see? Don't I know how to? What are you twerking to, Danielle? Oh,
she's singing. She's our intern is talking about sex and dancing to "Let's talk about sex."
That's what you're supposed to do when you talk about sex. You're supposed to cat daddy.
So I guess my one line inspires people. Whatever.
Yes, it empowers everyone. Real quick, guys, I want to give a personal shout out to Kwanzaa Billy, who could not make it this week. She is our business administrator person, and you see, it's not awkward because Selena's not saying it. She's our business. That's what it is. But we miss you, Selena, and we miss you, Kwanzaa. And if you just tuned in, we are talking about the legalization of marijuana, or maybe not. And we have Mr. John Walker on the phone, who has been giving us some very interesting information, including one in which during World War II, farmers were encouraged to grow cannabis. So, John, we have you back on air, and here we go. So, next question I want to go to, marijuana has been illegal all this time, but we have all these illegal underground, channels where people can sell and distribute it and make money off of it. And how, you want to legalize marijuana, but that's not going to stop the underground trafficking of it. And more than likely, with the regulations and the taxes, it'd be more expensive to buy it legally than it would be, from Saquon, who on 145th, who would just give it to me for $5. So what's the allure? Why even bother?
Oh, no, I think if you look at the history of, say, alcohol prohibition, when we legalized alcohol after prohibition, there's still some moonshiners, there's still some people who illegally sell alcohol, but they represent maybe only about 1% of the market. Most people don't like dealing with criminals. Most people like going to a store, getting a known product, one they know is tested, one that they know they could sue the producer of, if something was wrong with it.
Right.
I think the vast majority of people in this, if you look at certain states where they've approved medical marijuana, most of the people who use marijuana, the ones like California, they tend to get it from legitimate, at least quasi-legitimate dispensaries. I don't think most people would want to visit a criminal. I know I don't like going to criminals. I don't like hanging out with sketchy people. Yeah. I would much rather just go to my corner store.
Yeah, whoa, that'd be so awesome. I can get a Philly cheesesteak sandwich, a ginger ale, and a dime bag from the corner store. That'd be awesome. Really quickly, because we have a caller on air. His name is Austin, and he has a comment. Austin, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. As a avid weed smoker, I guess you could say, I see no problems with weed being legalized. It's just like alcohol. It's all about moderation. Like, I could go to the gym. I could smoke and then go to the gym and be productive, like as a weed smoker. So people saying it's just as dangerous as alcohol, or even more dangerous than alcohol, is completely false. Weed is harmless, in my opinion.
Austin, people like it's people like you that John needs to hear from, and make sure you go to his website. He'll announce it at the end of the segment so that you can join the campaign and help to legalize marijuana. Am I right, John?
Yep.
I mean, what John was talking about earlier, we were talking about during the break, even before we started the segment, which was about when you make things legal. For me, it's not so much about whether I like marijuana or I want to smoke it myself. I just feel that when you make things legal, then you have an avenue to make sure that it is safe. I mean, we talk about the meat industry and how people used to put fillers in there just to make it look like it was more meat. And in reality, it was like rats
because there were no regulations.
Whatever dead things you find in the street.
And that's why I love bacon.
And now that's not the same. But now we have the FDA. We just have a lot of avenues to make sure that it is safe. And I feel like we need to do that for marijuana. So instead of talking about, oh, it's going to kill people, or it's so dangerous, you're going to get hooked on it, it's a gateway drug to I don't know what, we can just say, like, why don't you make it safe so that it's as good to use as whatever it is. I mean, I don't even get it because we allow cigarettes. So I'm still just
cigarettes are probably worse.
Wait, I'm going to jump in on that, actually. I'm sorry, Patty.
Go ahead. No, right away.
John, Patricia said something very interesting, gateway drug. Marijuana has been linked to being a gateway drug for several drugs, including cocaine, heroin of some sorts, and now Molly's and ecstasies. Papa Molly, I'm sweating. Whew. So can you...
Wow. You guys need help.
Karina, we're kindred spirits. I felt that. But sorry, John, gateway drugs, marijuana.
Well, there's a few things. If you actually believe the gateway drug theory, the number one gateway drug is alcohol. Most people, the first drug they use is alcohol. That's the first intoxicant they'll ever use. So if you're really concerned about gateway, you need to ban alcohol. Now, the fact that marijuana's quote-unquote a gateway has relatively been disproven for the most part. People, the only way it really serves as a gateway, and this is a great argument for legalization, is that if you go to a marijuana dealer, they might also be a dealer for another illegal substance and try to sell that to you. And that's the only real way that marijuana is actually a gateway. If it was legalized and it was in a store, you would never come in contact with these people. And this is interesting. If you look at a place like Amsterdam, they got way lower use rates of cocaine, because they do not have the same black market infrastructure you do, and the same sort of street dealers you do, because, the number one drug people buy is marijuana. And if you remove that from the criminal enterprise, you dramatically shrink the black market in the gang activity and the criminal activity.
Well, that's a very good point. But we had a guest on here a couple of months ago, which our good friend Dustin, they had a huge debate over something the doctor said. The doctor said that honestly, it's not necessarily the drug that makes people go bad. It's the person within themselves, whether it's mental, personal issues that affect that kind of maximize the impact of the drug. And he said that, realistically, you could have someone who does cocaine or crack or heroin and still be a fully functioning human being. And with that argument and your argument for marijuana, why not just legalize all drugs?
Well, there's an argument to legalize all drugs, and that has been made by some people. And then there's the question of what is your goal with prohibition? Because as the ability to stop people from using drugs, it has failed pretty miserably. The United States has one of the highest uses of marijuana, even though we have some of the toughest marijuana laws in the Western world. I know places like Portugal have done a good job of basically decriminalizing all drugs. And so, what they do by doing that is they try to reduce the market by not having them, sold. But if you're using drugs, instead of arresting you, giving you a criminal record, sort of ruining your life, not, discouraging you, they use certain forms of treatment, forms of access to counseling, and they've done a much better job at controlling this public health problem of abuse.
Okay, I mean that's a good concept. I can assume, but is it effective?
In Portugal, yeah, they have lower use rates than most drugs in the United States does.
Really?
Yeah, we have to remember that the issue of drug abuse has always been in society. The biggest drug abuse is alcohol, and it's one of the most dangerous drugs to abuse. It kills, thousands and thousands of people a year, causes all sorts of domestic violence issues and all sorts of stuff. We haven't gotten rid of this issue. And criminalizing activity and locking people up and, giving them a felony record is not going to make them, that's not going to help them. Someone's an addict or something. Someone's got an actual medical problem with addiction. Making them a felon is not going to make their life easier and make it better for them to try to get help.
Okay, I mean, and that theory within itself makes sense.